Good morning. I'm Michelle Larson with Douglas Elliman Real Estate. There are two major pillars of people's wealth today, and those are real estate and investable assets. And we're fortunate today to have two experts in those fields. I'd like to introduce Howard M. Lorber, the Executive Chairman of Douglas Elliman, one of the largest luxury residential real estate brokerages in the country, and Louise Gunderson, Managing Director and Private Wealth Advisor at UBS, ranked by Forbes as the #1 female financial advisor in New York City. Welcome, Howard and Louise.
Thank you. Nice to be
Thank
here.
you. Nice to be here.
We've now been involved in a pandemic for almost a year that has crippled the nation. In light of that, people are understandably concerned about maintaining and building personal wealth. And a large piece of that is real estate. Now, Howard, we'll start with you. The New York real estate market came out of lockdown in June with phase 2 of the reopening plan, and in-person showings were allowed again. During lockdown, only virtual showings were allowed. While virtual showings are better than nothing, the majority of buyers still need to see property in person before putting 6 or 7 figures down for a down payment. The market is still not back to 100%, and a large component of that includes a large amount of available inventory, especially in the luxury sector. Howard, where do we go from here?
So since the reopening and being able to show in person, that decrease of 45% where we were at in New York City, of course, has gone down. I think the latest numbers show we're maybe down about 20% in New York City. But as a company, we're up because of all these other markets which didn't have the lockdowns and which continued to be able to show and to sell. And in the beginning, when it first opened, the biggest part of the market was under $2 million. That's what people were buying. Today, you still have a lot of that, but we also have had in the last month $35 million deals, $32 million deal, a few deals in the 20s, a bunch of deals in the teens. So the market has definitely come back at this particular time. It's come back well.
Thank you. So the market has come back in the uber luxury sector, the 32 to 35 million. I certainly remember the under 2 million and actually having bidding wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, our bidding was under $2 million.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I'd say probably the more difficult part of the market still is sort of in between, like maybe 7, 8 million to 15 million. It's probably a tougher part of the market. But that's always been sort of the tougher part of the market.
Right.
But the real high end, and again, on the real high end, there were big price decreases. So obviously that's what brought people into the market. And even at the low end, what was 3 million maybe became 2 million. So that's why you had so much action in the $1 to $2 million category.
Interesting. It's interesting the way COVID has affected the market. Certainly.
Yeah, it's not a surprise that a lot of people fled to the suburbs, whatever they consider to be the suburbs. And that sent those markets really, and they needed it because they, as I said, Westchester County, Fairfield County, and the suburbs of like Nassau County and around, they really were down probably 40% or more during the financial crisis, 08, 09.
That's right.
And really never recovered. This is the first time business is brisk and we see prices starting to go up. They haven't taken off like some of the other markets, but they're starting to go up and there's more business being done there now.
Yes, well, I guess there's something to be said for working virtually, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly.
Changed. Louise, can you talk about COVID as it pertains to private wealth?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, what clients are asking is, am I going to be okay? Not just financially, but personally. They're worried about their financial security in this uncertain environment. So it's my job to provide them with comfort, reassurance. COVID is just not a financial crisis. It's a global situation. It affects all market, all geographies, and all generation. And it goes beyond just an investment or one economy. So this has really given me an opportunity to be a resource to the client, to have conversations first and foremost about protecting their assets, which clearly pertains to how they're allocated. So in my world, different than a little bit of in Howard's world, we tailor each client's portfolio according to the size of their assets, their cash flow needs. Do I have enough money to live on? And of course, their risk appetite. So cash flow is vital to preserve the lifestyle. And of course, let's not forget about their ability to pay taxes. So right now, having a calm and confident approach matters more than ever. And we consistently remind everyone that having quality investments that are diversified and resilient. If we're doing our job right, then the client should have a good sense of security. And I truly believe that clients are willing to give up a little bit of participation in a market run up in order just to preserve their capital. So the most important thing, stay calm, think about what your goals and objectives are, and have a plan.
It sounds very similar to real estate, Louise.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, they marry each other, the asset classes, very well.
Yeah, they really do. Howard, real estate comprises a substantial portion of most people's personal wealth. Has COVID changed the way people are investing in real estate?
The trends, I think, are similar. I mean, I will say this, the COVID itself, when you look at New York City, okay, the COVID itself was not the reason for the whole slow market in the city and price drops in the city. It started before because of the changes in taxes. You had a mansion tax went into effect June of last year, June of 19. You have increased transfer taxes and recording taxes. So it was hurt before. And then you had COVID. And then even when people became a little calmer about COVID, then they were concerned about the safety of the city and big cities, due to protesting, which turned into riots sometimes. And that's, the one thing on everyone's mind when they buy real estate is it safe. Not is the real estate safe to buy, but is the neighborhood you're living in, or the state you're living in, or city you're living in safe. And people didn't have that feeling, with the movement to defund police and everything. It was a very difficult time. So it's like getting hit over the head, like 5 times. You had the tax increases, then you had COVID, then you had the protests and the riots, and everyone was like, wow, And a lot of people, left. Now, I'm a big believer in the city, and the city has always come back, and I believe it will come back again. Politics played a role in it. The mayor was basically not effective at all. So at some point, a year and change from now, we'll have a new mayor. Hopefully that'll be better. But people have to feel safe and comfortable where they live in order to spend money. And the government, the local government did not do a very good job with that. So the COVID's one thing, the taxes are another thing, and the safety is another. So you have 3 different things which all sort of converged at a bad time. And that's why you have that tremendous drop in sales in New York City. I always think of real estate as a safe asset class. And I think as a safe asset class for a few reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons are it's a comfortable, more so than even safe, it's a comfortable real estate class. You know why it's comfortable? Because you can't look at your iPhone like you can with your portfolio and see how much you lost every minute or how much you paid every minute. And therefore you can't react that quick. And usually when you react that quick, it turns out to be bad. Now I went through that myself when the market was going down and, right after the shutdowns, I guess it was in April, and kept going down and down. I looked through my portfolio and I had managers and so forth, and I didn't care. I hadn't spoken to a manager. I really just saw some stocks that I had that were way up, but then they were way down again. I'm still making money on them. One of them was Apple. Okay. So being the intelligent person I am, I sold Apple. Then was like in a second, then was $230 a share. which today, after the split, is the equivalent of about, today, the stock's 480 when you take into account the split. Okay, and that's not very long ago. That's what, 6 months ago. Now, if I could never do that with real estate, I maybe would have said, "Oh, I should sell my city apartment," but then it's not something you can do right away. So I think that real estate is a comfortable asset because you can't have that knee-jerk reaction, and also it's a place you live, so you're not going to move that quickly because you can't. If you have a good advisor like Louise, you should listen to her before you go and do something stupid like I did. And sold the winner.
We'll talk about it, Howard.
Yeah, I sold the winner and kept the losers. So that was a bad move. People are buying today different. What's more popular today is sort of the newer buildings. The old Upper East Side co-ops, where many of us have lived over the years, are more difficult to sell today because they have these rules, which I would call them archaic, but most of them have it, where they need those apartments generally need gut renovations, and they have what you call summer work rules, which basically means you can work through June, July, August, into September. And if you ever did a gut renovation, you know how long that takes. So if you only could work like 4 months a year, it's going to take you 4 years or maybe 5 years to get it done. So that's been a big negative on certain apartments. And then also the newer buildings that have come into the market have amenities that are very much different than they had in the older buildings. And I've lived in the older buildings. You have a little gym in the basement, with no light, and that was about it. Now you have the new buildings. You have pools, you have health spas, you have movie theaters, you have huge gyms and spas, and so it's a lot, and restaurants in the building. But I also say the only issue with that is, because I remember being there when this started happening, is the first thing that the building did is they closed down the gym. Then they closed down the spa. Then they closed down the pool. Then they closed down the movie part. They basically effectively closed down everything. So you didn't have use of all those amenities, which led me to believe that maybe what's going to happen now, and I'm starting to see it happen, is that townhouses come back in favor, because townhouses have been very flat and down for the last number of years. Okay, they've gone through periods where the condos on a per square foot basis, the new condos exceed the price of these townhouses substantially on a per square foot basis. But yet, on the other hand, in a time like COVID, when you think about it logically, it's sort of a great asset in real estate, because if you live there, you can do whatever you want. You want to have a pool in your townhouse, you can have a pool. You have a problem with someone sick, they could quarantine on one of the floors. They can close down your restaurant. You still generally have outdoor space, little outdoor space in the back, so you're not going to run into anyone else. So they offer a lot. And I think there's going to be a play going forward of people becoming more serious about looking at townhouses. I guess the one negative that I guess that people are still concerned about, because they were concerned about it before this period of time that we've had these problems in safety, is they worry about safety. There's no doorman, whatever. But it's interesting because most of these townhouses are on blocks where there are apartment buildings, and there are always doormen around. So I think though that the pandemic, I think when you think about it, I think the values of townhouses are going to increase as they should when you look at all the positives compared to an apartment.
You're making me wish I hadn't sold my townhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we sold it a couple of years ago. It was a good time. I think the other thing, again, that really affected the market besides COVID, can't just blame it on COVID, was everything we just talked about before. The mansion tax, the SALT, the loss of the state and local tax deductions, transfer taxes, mortgage taxes going up. And now, by the way, they're talking about increasing the real estate taxes.
That's right.
I think I saw 15%. Nothing has happened yet, but that's what the talk is. So all in all, you have plenty of reasons to hesitate about buying, but the prices have adjusted to a point where the risk reward is probably worth it now, if you're going to live in the city and be in the city. And there are people will come back to the city. I read 3,000 people left, I think, to Florida alone. But you know what? That always happens as time goes on. People change, what they want, where they want to live. So I don't really think I wouldn't call that a huge exodus. Maybe it was a huge exodus when you just look at the wealth of those people that left. And that was primarily tax motivated. And the ones that didn't do it because they didn't want to just move for taxes, when the COVID came, they decided they wanted to be out of the city. So it was the perfect time or excuse for them to say, well, let's go to Florida or someplace else where the state tax, local taxes are very low.
True. Yeah, those are all interesting points. They're very interesting points, particularly with safety. And I have to say, I did plug townhouses in my last newsletter.
Good for
I
you.
feel exactly the same way about them. People are safer. They're not sharing elevators. They're not sharing lobbies or any amenities. Louise, Howard has mentioned the tax situation, COVID, safety, and newer and older buildings, and also real estate being a comfortable asset class. How has COVID changed the way you conduct business now?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of points that Howard brought up, so I guess I'll weave into, my remarks. First, for sure, we're operating in our respective homes and apartments, which is very different than operating in an office. So how do we do it? So we meet twice a day to review our work, early in the morning before the market opens, and then at the close of business. We're engaging with our clients differently. And so we're creating new ways of how to build relationships remotely. And interestingly enough, my business has been very successful during the COVID because people want to get their lives in order. So that's the first part of it. Real estate as part of an asset allocation, it really plays a role in clients' allocation. And we view it just like an asset class, just like a stock or a bond. And we've had many, many conversations on real estate, since COVID started, whether that's a move to the suburbs or staying in the city. We become a resource for them when they're trying to make that decision.
Can you discuss real estate as part of an asset allocation a little bit more?
Yeah. So, we're finding a lot of interest, and people, are really aware, to Howard's point, that there is a little bit of an inventory surplus in New York City. And of course, the mortgage interest rate environment is incredibly favorable to borrow money, with interest rates being so low. They've lowered the tax deduction from $1 million to $750 for new mortgages, but it still, gives people the opportunity to borrow at really low rates. I think a number of clients have encouraged their children to purchase a first home for themselves. So we've had to help them guide through that process. I think clients who had been on the fence about moving out of the city maybe have decided to take the plunge and move to a house in the suburbs. So I think from the perspective of real estate, single family housing market has been a clear beneficiary. Some other things, older millennials are getting married and they're having children. There's a pent up demand, from the spring selling season. And that was delayed to the shelter in place restrictions that, again, Howard brought up. And as I said before, the low mortgage rates have encouraged people to be buyers rather than the sellers. And I think finally, this remote working requires more space in a traditional city apartment. I myself, moved out for the last 8 months to my house rather than my apartment, came back to the city for a bit. And, again, seeing the city be very resilient, I was very surprised to see how secure I felt. But there is something to be said about a little bit more space. So for employees with the ability to work remotely full time, I think that they've chosen to do that, whether it's, you know, a second home or whether that's literally to move out, and things that have become more affordable, you know, where their home office can be located. I think an interesting part, you know, talking about the beach, some city dwellers are fortunate to have second homes at the beach. And where I thought that was really a down market, or whether they live at the beach or in the Markins, they've chosen, you know, to ride out COVID. So I think the question is going to be, is that a temporary phenomenon? And will people ultimately return to the city when things begin to normalize? You know, the move to Florida is a little bit more of a tax consequence. The move to, let's say, the Hamptons is not as much, but I think the concept is going to be, you know, their second home, will it be permanent or not?
It's interesting because there's a lot of people that believe just because they're going to stay out there the year that they won't have to pay city taxes.
Right.
And that's most likely not true. Not true.
Howard, we spent a lot of time on that, you
Yeah.
know, walking people through that concept. And, you know, taxes matter, as we all know.
Right.
Absolutely. So you're seeing a lot of movement from millennials, from young buyers, Louise.
Yeah, and I think that they, again, parents are encouraging their children to buy because of interest rates being low, and with estate planning, which, you know, I might tell you a little bit about that later. You know, they're encouraging the gifting to the children, and real estate becomes part of that.
Yeah, a big part of that. Yeah, I'm finding that that's very true among my clients. I've been contacted by parents and children alike who are looking for their first home, the children's first home.
Yeah.
So New York certainly presents opportunities in that regard. That's fascinating. So Howard, to wrap up, as an expert in your space and given all that we've discussed, what would be the one piece of advice that you'd want to give all the listeners about the real estate market today?
Well, I think what you have to do if you're buying real estate to live in, not just as an investment, and hopefully it'll be a good investment if you're, you know, stay long enough, you should. I agree with what Louise said. It's almost free these days. I mean, when you look at interest rates where they are, you look at the prices down. You look at almost no interest rate. It's very compelling to buy real estate at this time, especially if you're going to live in it. Would it be good just to buy on speculation and so forth? Probably not, because that's always a timing thing. But if you're going to buy an apartment and you live in the city, you know, you're going to have a horizon which is probably at the very least, you know, 5 to 10 years. Okay, anything less than that doesn't make sense. You could rent. Because, by the way, we haven't talked about rentals. Rental prices are way down also in the city. In the Hamptons, they're up about 5 times this past summer. You couldn't find a rental. It was very difficult. So I think that it is a good time to buy. It's a good time to plan to buy. And there are certain people, you know, that have to be in the city. You know, if you work in the city, or there's a husband and wife and they both have jobs in the city, you know, and with children, you effectively have to. It may not be your first choice. And I always felt, and some people say when I say that, well, not everyone could do that, but if you can, I'd say I grew up in the suburbs, first in New Jersey, then raised my family in Long Island. And I thought people that lived in the city full time and had their kids in school, the kids were going to be strange going to school in New York City, because I never spent any time in New York City, never knew much about it until I moved full time. I had an apartment for years, but I very rarely went. But when I moved full time into the city 25 years ago, I changed my view completely. I think it's the greatest place to raise children. Okay, great schools, public schools. There's some really good ones. Private schools. There's a lot of very good ones, and there is so much to offer the parents and the children. I remember when I finally decided to move into the city, my kids were out of the house. You know the truth? I lived in Long Island. I was bored. I didn't know what to do. Okay. Since I moved in the city, there's never been a day where I didn't have something to do. It's just a great place. And that's the next thing that we're all going to look forward to, which will really help the pricing. which is why I'm a big believer to buy now, is the return of why people come to the city. Theater, sports, concerts, movies, you can go on and on. Now, none of those things exist today, and yet the market has recovered. So when those start coming back, which I assume they will during 2021 into 2022, I think then you're going to really see prices, go way up. So I think, and maybe interest rates are going to start going up by then. The new administration, who knows? But it could very well be time that interest rates start going up. So I think this is just a fantastic time to invest in the city and come and I didn't finish the comment I was making. I said I always thought the city, when people ask me about the city, I said personally I think the city is the greatest place in the world if you have someplace else to go once in a while, because I don't know if I'd want to be there every day 365 days a year. But it's a great time to buy.
True. Very, very true. Well, I couldn't agree more with that. I raised my children in the city, as did Louise,
Yeah.
in and out of the city. So that's, I believe that. And people are coming back. And I think a little of that, Howard, is anticipatory too. I think people expect the theater and the restaurants and everything to come back because they will come back.
They will.
Absolutely. Louise, I'm going to switch this question over to you now. What is the one piece of advice that you would give listeners as it pertains to private wealth management, the private wealth management space today?
Well, on Howard's point, I raised my two children in the city at schools in the city, and I still have one that's still here with me. So I'm Manhattan support all the way. So let me sum up by saying, first of all, you need to have very clear goals. When you're thinking about your finances, your goals should form kind of the foundation for all types of investment, estate planning issues, any decisions that you want to make going forward. And developing them, updating your goals, it requires asking yourself, what's my desired lifestyle? What does it include? How you want to improve the lives of others? The goals could be renovate or sell your home, pay for college, contribute to charity. These are easy to recognize. Some of them are a bit more obscure because it involves health issues. You don't want to burden your children. And so you've got to think about that also. Second, I think you need a financial plan. I think this helps you feel more prepared to meet what life's challenges are today. And certainly with COVID, it just was a sobering situation that happened. No one prepared for it. But this just makes you think that planning becomes much more relevant and important. It takes into account all the various aspects of your financial life, and you should consolidate that information so you know exactly where you stand. I think the third point has to be about liquidity, preserving your lifestyle. Know what your cash flow that you need to live day to day. And what I've been advising clients very simply is have at least 1 year in advance of your cash flow. Know what it costs to live and make sure you preserve that aspect. This market has surely been, I guess, unsuspecting. No one would have believed it. It would have behaved quite like this, since the low point in March, as Howard was mentioning, until now. And even though there's a potential we're close to a vaccine, I still believe there's uncertainty about market levels. We've had lots of unemployment. We have lots of things that haven't been, planned or decided upon. We have a new administration. So there's lots of uncertainty that may drive some of these market levels. And finally, make sure your estate plan is in orders. That may change in 2023, but understand what tax implications are involved. Make sure it's updated. Take the time to plan now. I will help you give the confidence that everything is in order, and it'll ensure that the details around the management of your estate will be carried out efficiently in the manner that you want, especially with your children. And I'd say, in summing, have a good attorney, have a good financial advisor, and have a good accountant. Those are the three things that are really important in your planning.
And I guess I would add, have a good real estate broker.
And a good real estate broker if you want to make, right, exactly. Well, we know Michelle is a good one, Howard.
Yeah, just as you are a great planner, financial planner.
Thank you.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Well, that was fantastic. I thank you for discussing two such important pillars. And you've both given us a lot to think about. You've given me a lot to think about. So I'm sure you've given the viewers a lot to think about. Howard Lorber and Louise Gunderson, we thank you again for joining us. And thank you for your insight and knowledge.
Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Please stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Take care.